Hey, Jamie, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Yeah.
I'm glad.
This week we got a great guest. And I'd like to jump in there because I want to actually think about or ask you your own reflections about your own work and things like that.
I think she's amazing.
Isn't she great?
Totally great. In fact, talk about right on time for me as a leader. Like I'm struggling a little bit with my own internal relationships in my organization. Everyone's great. I have smart partners, but we all think really differently. And I think of a relationship sometimes like a rubber band, right? It's really good when it's loose, but when it gets harder, it gets stretched. And
well,
stretched,
let me
stretched.
Okay, but let me challenge that a little bit because I think we grow when we stretch ourselves, and yet we can't stay in that spot all the time. We have to get loose, and we have to give ourselves opportunity to reflect and think and celebrate, apologize, reflect, write, all those kinds of things. And it allows us to then stretch again, to stretch ourselves. So I like rubber band as
it wasn't a challenge. That's not a challenge. It's an add-on. You're adding to the metaphor.
Fine. I'd like to add to your metaphor because I think it's a really good one. And I think it can be extended to include the fact that tension, while it's uncomfortable in the moment, can be incredibly important for an organization, particularly a small one like yourself.
Agreed.
We're all incredibly talented, driven, complement each other, and at the same time, sometimes have divergent thoughts about the best way to move forward. And so then that requires some tension and some pulling, and then for everybody to let go for a minute, to let it go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This is a prime example that Jill made me reflect on my own leadership. Jill is me. And I have a colleague that is just like the person that she's describing in terms of that is like action oriented. And I'm interested in the next big thing. I want to talk to Peter again. That's what I want to do. That sounds fun. Let's listen to Jill. And she's like, and where are we going? What's the thing? When are the slides due? Like slides? Who needs those?
Practice? We talking practice?
Oh, my favorite. I'm so happy that you bring that up. AI is the best.
Allen Iverson, not AI, artificial intelligence.
The original AI.
That's right. Yes. So how about this? Let's listen to Jill Molli, and then we'll come back and have a conversation.
Perfect.
Imperfect leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? Kind of a silly question, because I know you are. Empath Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with Empath Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. Empath Speech. EMPAT Empowering students, empowering schools.
Today on An Imperfect Leader, our guest is Jill Molli, Chief Growth Officer for Conscious Discipline. Now, Jill is a former teacher, counselor, behavioral specialist, and in her role at Conscious Discipline, she has the responsibility of leading large-scale implementation at schools, at the district level, at state and national levels as well. Jill, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I love being here.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here. And I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because I believe so much in conscious discipline. Its mission, its guiding principles. Having been the principal of an elementary school that was a conscious discipline school, I absolutely can attest to know that I became a better educator. I became a better parent. I became a better spouse. I really feel like I just became a better person because of conscious discipline. And I'd like to start right off with leadership, if that's okay. In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a model. The model has a dimension. And inside one of those dimensions is called nested patterns. And part of nested patterns has empathy and compassion. And these are, I think, two traits that are at the heart of conscious discipline and should be at the heart of any leader, especially superintendents looking to shift their district's culture. So my question is this. Superintendents often face resistance when trying to implement large-scale change. I mean, shifting the cultural field of an organization is a radical endeavor. And often the system will work aggressively to get back to status quo. It likes status quo. So I wonder, in the work that you've been doing with schools and districts and state and at the national level, whether it's among teachers, principals, or district leaders, how does conscious discipline help shift those adult mindsets to really create that culture that supports sustainable transformation?
You know what, Peter? This is the most perfect question at the most perfect time, because here's what I want you to know. So, as you said, I was a teacher. I was a trainer for conscious discipline for over 20 years. And only in the last 2 or 3 years have I been at this executive level, more at a district level in my mind. And one of the things that we've decided in the last year is we're creating a certified leadership path. So we're going to build what we call conscious leadership. And we do believe that we do it differently. We really look at, and because like you were a principal, I was a teacher, a third grade teacher who used conscious discipline. I was a guidance counselor who used conscious discipline. And now I have helped leaders for 20 years implement conscious discipline. And so one of the things that we feel like is critical to recognize is we believe there are layers of leadership. So certainly a teacher leads the classroom, the principal leads the campus, and the superintendent leads the entire community, as well as, what's going on in the school. Well, the big differentiator between conscious discipline and other programs is we're not a set of curriculum. We're not a set of books. And so here's what I want you to envision in your head. Most folks have a checklist. So a lot of superintendents are very left-brained. A lot of principals are very left-brained. They like their linear, logical, linguistic. They like all of the things to be data. And so they check things off of a list. For us to shift a culture, we see it as a circle. So shift from your checklist in your brain and move to a bullseye. Okay, so I want you to see a bullseye in front of you. And now I'm going to tell you the traditional way we have tried to shift culture and mindset in the past. The superintendent always has a vision. That's his job. The principal always has a vision for his school, and the teacher always has a vision for her classroom. And so when you look at that vision of the superintendents, the next layer slides into sometimes compliance, obedience, but underlying is control. So there feels like there's, in many traditional models, there's this control piece. And underneath the control piece, often we have a lot of external ways that we get that obedience or that compliance or that control, and those are called rewards and punishments. And then on the bullseye, bing, then you have the culture. So that's kind of the way that we've done layers of leadership in the past. Here's our tweak. So our tweak is we're not external. So we're not going to read a book to you in a classroom about being kind while you're saying, sit down, don't do that. How many times do I talk? We're going to ask you to be the kindness. So you're going to be the change. So that's the first piece. So in that first layer, the superintendent still has vision. That hasn't changed at all. But what the change is, we change compliance, control, and obedience into self-regulation. So the next thing that superintendent has is this amazing ability to regulate and pause. A parent comes in upset and angry, and before responding, they are able to pause. So we teach these 7 powers, and these powers inform that superintendent's ability to respond. Underneath that, instead of having rewards and punishment, we actually have skills. So we, instead of saying, here's an external thing, let's just take, for example, teacher burnout. So if you have a vision for teacher burnout and you have a way and a structure that you want to work on that, a lot of times we use external ways to adjust that by saying, let's cut down the PD days, let's give more jeans days, and so we come up with a lot of external themes.
Right. Don't forget, like, the spirit. Whatever college you went to, wear that sweatshirt. Everybody should feel good. You should feel good now, right? Well, how come our retention rates haven't improved? I did the jean day.
You hit the nail on the head. I
wanted to hit the bullseye since we were using that as a metaphor.
Hit the bullseye. And so what we want to shift in conscious discipline is, how can we help teachers, principals, and superintendents help teachers first reflect and recognize their feeling and then regulate it?
I love it because, I mean, truly, when you talk about this sort of self-regulation, I really think you were speaking to, and you just said the word reflect. It's about reflection. It's around avoiding the impulse to make a quick decision. It's about understanding one's perspective. There's the Water Center for Systems Thinking has this great Habits of Systems Thinking card, and it talks about perspective, and it shows a child and a parent looking at a dog in the window of a pet store. And of course, the child is thinking, is sort of has this thought cloud of, I'm hugging this dog. This is my lifelong friend. And the parent is looking at it and the thought cloud is, this is going to be really expensive. And so how do we in our work particularly use the example of a parent coming in, making an appointment with the superintendent is that individual is fired up about something. And we often have a very quick impulse to try to just fix it as opposed to finding out where does this person's beliefs, principles, and values sort of inform the way that they're seeing the situation, and how does it align to what we already know that the good things that are happening in that school, and how do we find some common ground? But sometimes we fall victim to the impulse to make a quick decision, to your point of a checklist, to say, we've checked that one off because we got the next one coming. And you're saying, I'm going to help you slow it down.
And I think that example is so perfect when you think of the parent. And here is one thing that we would say to every leader. Remember this clause. This experience is happening in front of me, not to me. So when the parent comes in and say, you are running this school and you have a school where they are biased and unkind to children, and they are saying you and pointing their finger, you have to be able to pause, regulate.
Yes. I think my trainer, who you know and know so well, I think Jeanette French taught us the phrase Q-tip, which was quit taking it personally, right? It's a Q-tip moment. This is not about you, but they are coming to you because they see you as capable of helping them.
Yes. And if we can own and grab hold of that, the culture shifts, because here's what's happening. When you respond to the parent and that parent walks out laughing and having a conversation with you, guess what happens? The secretary says, I don't know what Peter does, but it's magic. And then that permeates into your school district, and folks say, I want to know your secret. So what the biggest thing I believe that if you truly do start with the superintendent, and I have to tell you, Peter, we've really been a very teacher-focused approach for the first 25 years of our, existence. You were an outlier. You were like, okay, I'm a principal. I'm really going to, but really in the last 10 years, we've started talking so much more with administrators and really recognizing that it truly is the administrator that sets the culture. And then you're able to have huge impacts, beyond. So it's exciting.
I love it. If you're just joining us on An Imperfect Leader, our guest today is Jill Molli, a former teacher, counselor, and behavior specialist, and now the Chief Growth Officer for Conscious Discipline. Jill, I remember when I was a principal, and it was absolutely because of Vicki Robb that I became so engaged in this as well. So Vicki was it was like parents were going there, and what is her secret? Because they would come out arm in arm. We're going to do this for our kids. We're going to do this together. So our school district, though, they invested a considerable amount of time and money in behavior or positive behavior intervention support, so PBIS. And we liked the systems that came with PBIS, including data collection, the terminology like conscience of behavior, understanding why a child is behaving the way that they're behaving. But what it lacked from our perspective was sort of the heart for children, the human-centered part of working for children and with children. And so we always said by allowing us to apply conscious discipline teachings and strategies throughout the school, that it would yield the results that everybody cares about. Children who care about themselves and others, children who excel academically, improve teacher well-being, safer schools. So many superintendents who listen have the same priorities. They're focused on the same things: improving student achievement, increasing teacher retention, creating safer school environments. So how can conscious discipline be integrated into these district-wide goals? And what data or outcomes have you seen that demonstrate its impact at scale?
Well, I would love to take you on a walk with me to a district specific, because I think it's super helpful to not talk in generalities, but to really truly talk about a district that we've really transformed.
Awesome.
And so Liberty, Missouri is in Kansas.
Jeremy Tucker, one of my favorite leaders. Oh my. I just actually saw him recently and said to him, you've been on my podcast. so we'll get him one day. He is, and I'll tell you as a superintendent, I had presence of mind to recognize that I was not an expert on integration of technology in schools. And so I reached out to him and said, would you come and do my World Cafe in terms of, instead of my addressing the community, I will say, I'm so glad you're all here. I want you to meet an incredible educator, Jeremy Tucker. And he was so marvelous, to give us his time and his energy and his perspective. So, okay, what are you going to tell me about Jeremy? Because I'm a fan.
He's done that and continued to grow and surround himself with amazing individuals. So one of the schools, it was the early childhood, no surprise to you, because conscious discipline is known most in early childhood. So it was an early childhood principal who went to the district office in Liberty, Missouri, and said, I really believe we need to look at this, not just as an early childhood approach, but really as a district initiative. Well, I'll tell you, Peter, we're a little sensitive about district initiatives. We know there's a huge initiative fatigue. And so we really caution superintendents when they are implementing conscious discipline to first start with the willing instead of create a district initiative, because conscious discipline will increase your teacher retention. It will actually also increase your test scores, even though we don't even teach anything about reading or math. And your culture will certainly change. But what Jeremy Tucker was willing to do was to say, hey, Jill Molli, will you come in and just talk with our principals? And whoever raises their hand, we have, a set aside amount of money. And out of our 13 elementaries and our early childhood center, we're going to probably work with like 3 or 4. We're just going to start with a small group and no pressure. He takes all the pressure off me as the instructor. I get to say, listen, if you're in the middle of a math initiative, focus on that. Jeremy's not going to be upset. There was no pressure from the superintendent. And so 4 schools chose. Here's who they were, Peter. The Early Childhood Center, the Alternative High School, and 2 Title Elementaries. So we started implementing, and then here's what starts happening. This curiosity thing is so much more powerful for you than an initiative. So now all of a sudden, Dr. Tyler Shannon, who is the principal at the elementary school, starts having all of this wild success. And principals start saying to the special programs director, Jessica, Dr. Meisenheimer, how come we don't get conscious discipline? How come you're only giving it to Tyler? And how come you're only giving it to this school and that school? And Dr. Meisenheimer says, we offered it to everyone. There were only 4 people that raised their hand. Let me just tell you, in 8 years, these are the outcomes that have happened. They use Panorama. So that's one resource that you can use that kind of gives you a grade card, essentially, of how things are feeling inside your district. And so when they looked at school climate, starting in 2019, now we all know what happened, remember, in 2020.
You're going to make me get in a corner in a fetal position, but yes, keep going.
In the winter of 2019, their climate and culture percentage was about 52. So 52%, that was year 3 of implementing conscious discipline for them. So they'd been at it for a minute. Then we had the winter of 2020, went down to 45. The fall of 2023, the winter of 2023, we moved the needle from 45% in school climate to 89%.
So, from 45 to 80 plus, what do you account for that? That's a profound increase.
He shifted his PDP goals. His PDP goals were no longer about reading and math. They were about wellness. So when he's walking down the hall, here's what he would do. He would walk by a teacher and say, did you take your vitamins today? Did you walk 100 steps this morning before you got here? He would walk through and talk to teachers about their wellness. And then he created a grade card. And they didn't turn it into him, but it was ways that they believed that they created safety and connection in their classroom. And the cafeteria people had it. The custodian had it. Every person in his entire environment talked about how to help children feel safe and connected.
Okay, so I'm sure outside of Liberty, there's another school district that you have in mind.
Springfield, Missouri, working with those schools, working in the middle school, they decreased their discipline referrals 300 between 2019 and 2023. And in that time, Peter, their math index score went up 25 points.
Well, you know why? If you decrease 300 out-of-school suspensions, that means you have an increase of 2,400 hours of learning. Yes. You can't learn if you're not there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So huge changes that happened as a result.
2,400 hours of learning, 2,400 hours of connection to adults and peers, 2,400 hours of nutrition if you're participating in the lunch program, 2,400 hours of PE and physical activity and art.
One other school that we work with, North College Hill in North College Hill, Ohio. And here's the thing that's really interesting about them. So their superintendent, Dr. Blaylock, it's a small urban district inside the community. And for the first time in a decade, he wrote this to me. I was asking him about some other things, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to share this with Peter. He wrote to me actually this morning, his assistant superintendent, and what she said to me is this is the first time in a decade since starting conscious discipline implementation 8 years ago that not one of their schools was on an improvement status. And she said everyone who is an urban inner city school, you just constantly have a school that is in some sort of, concern with the state. And she said it's the first time in a decade for them. And so again, we don't teach math and reading, but to your point, when children feel safe, when children are connected,
Yep.
Learning is crazy.
Yep. And, you don't teach reading, you don't teach math. You also don't teach a mindset. You help people access a mindset that they've always craved to have. I really believe that. I'm going to ask you a question I ask every guest who comes on the show. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
Oh, man, the alignment that your podcast has with conscious discipline is just unbelievable on so many levels. But the one thing that we ask our teachers, our principals, and our superintendents to do is to learn this word, OOPS. Now, we believe that OOPS stands for our opportunity to problem solve or to practice a new skill. And so we believe that as a leader, being able to help people see that you're growing and that you're reflecting and that there is no perfect goal that you're striving towards, but what you're striving towards is just more learning. So, we embrace that. We love that.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Jill Molli, the Chief Growth Officer for Conscious Discipline. Now, in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision they made, and then we discuss it. So, Jill, what happened?
Okay. So, here's why you get promoted, Peter. The reason you become a principal, the reason you become, in charge of special programs, or in my case, the reason you leave the field that you were so passionate about and changing the lives of teachers and kids all the time, and you move to the executive level of business, is because you did something really well. So when you were a teacher, you were phenomenal, and they picked you out of that and said, lead this school. So here's the one thing that you have to do when you become a leader. You've done something really well. Now you have to lead other people to do that very thing well, and you can't do it.
I love this as an example. First of all, I'm just going to relate to the fact that in the first book that I wrote around An Imperfect Leader, I mentioned the fact that, yes, you're a classroom teacher of between 25 and 30 kids. You do a great job. People identify you. They think you're ready for a principalship. And then you're a principal of 300 kids and you know every kid by name and their parents. And you're able to sign the perfect attendance awards that morning because you've got all this, you're relationship driven, not systems thinking necessarily. And then all of a sudden you're responsible for a $300 million budget. You've got 3,000 employees and you're making profoundly important, with great, like huge ramification, these decisions. And you're going, I wasn't trained for this. So how do I do this? So I imagine you're about to tell me this is very similar. So, okay.
So I went from, wow, I can lead a superintendent or a principal to choose conscious discipline. And so here's when they pulled me into the executive world, they said, man, you're an amazing salesman. I said, oh, no, I'm not a salesman. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a teacher. And because I teach it so brilliantly and I follow through, people just choose conscious discipline. But I don't have a sales job. I don't do anything in sales. Well, so then just like you, 3,000 employees, $16 million is what I have to help the company make in training and coaching. But I can't make $16 million. I have to help this team of people. So here's what I learned. When you're a leader and you're building a team, it's so critical. Sometimes you're drawn to people who think like you, who talk like you. It just feels good to have them with you and working with you. So I went, Peter, and I looked for passionate people. I'm super passionate. So I looked for passionate people. Quickly, what I learned was the decision for passionate people was wonderful, but they had to be passionate people, and I needed some of them to be systems thinkers. Well, the struggle that I ran into was I am a visionary. I think really big, and I am fabulous at inspiring. I can help you with the why. But what I needed were people on my team that understood the what to do. So I brought somebody on who I thought was fantastic at the what to do. The learning for me that I took away was, I don't like to talk about the what to do. I want to go on to the next thing, the next big vision, the next big fun thing. So you're not going to finish any project with Jill because I never get to the matter of fact, you got to do this, then you got to do this, then you got to do this, then you got to do this, and you got to do this. I'm so in the let's move on to the next innovation. And so the big learning that I had for me was those folks that were systems leaders were a vital and valuable part. And I had to learn to pause as they asked me 17,000 questions. And I had to value the questions because in the beginning, in the first, 8 months, I was irritated by the questions. You're slowing me down. And what the real turn of events were, you're helping me make this happen. And I was able to, luckily find that before the end and thank them. And we became a wonderful partnership.
This is amazing. I do believe that you're really speaking to, as people who listen to this podcast can attest, they're either aspiring superintendents or in the principalship and they're thinking, or they're an assistant superintendent and they're thinking about applying for a superintendency. And it's a radically different job than the other jobs that are in central office or at the district level. You have to build a team. You have to trust your team. You may inherit members of the team. And as you're recruiting to complement your work style and your leadership style, as opposed to having someone who's completely aligned and similar to you, that doesn't get you very far. It just, you both sort of bouncing off each other. Isn't this great? It's a great idea. Yeah. So I'm curious, it sounds like you have a very specific example about as you now were in charge of a team and as you were recruiting members to join that team and to grow the business, that there were things that were overlooked. So what I heard you say what was overlooked was initially you were following this idea of I need to build a team of people who have a similar perspective in the way that I operate. And I needed to really broaden and recognize and value the different ways that people bring, the different skills that they can bring to the work, system thinking approaches. Am I capturing that?
100%. And I'll tell you, what I realized was I needed a me guiding me. So, that's what I went and did for superintendents. I would help a superintendent see the value that others brought to that team. Like, I see why this feels comfortable. I see why this feels really easy to work with this group. Here's what this person is bringing. Could you look at it as healthy conflict instead of as defiance or instead of as a threat?
So I'm curious also about, so what did you learn about relationships? How did you slow yourself down?
Well, so I hired a me. His name was Matt Teeter. And so he's a retired superintendent. And I knew that I wanted this team to be able to relate to, have conversations with superintendents. So in the beginning, My goal was Matt Teeter is a retired superintendent. He's going to bring knowledge about schools and systems. What I didn't, of course, realize is Matt Teeter is a magical superintendent who understands relationships.
He's a special person.
He is. So I hired Matt Teeter, and what he beautifully did was so much more than share. Look, I thought I was going to help them know how to go in and talk to a superintendent, because here's the truth. The funny thing about our association, because as I said to you in the beginning, we used to just talk with teachers. So I got these passionate folks who were teachers themselves, and they were a little intimidated by a superintendent. They were a little intimidated, like what, how, and I said, we're going to teach them the brain. We're going to teach them about compassion. We're going to teach them to be the same leader we want the principal to be. And so when I thought that's what Matt was going to bring to the table, was to help demystify a superintendent, he actually brought this beautiful piece to me about essentially how he worked with his cabinet, how he created, a system around him. And so what he was great about doing was he said to the person who was a questioner and a systems thinker and thought about all the details, he said, here's what you have. In a meeting with Jill, you have 4 questions. 4. Think very closely about which 4 of the 20 that are in your head do you really want her to respond to? Because after 4, she starts shutting down. Now, I'm working with her to be able to listen to 10. But if we can both and so together, what he did was he helped me see that it wasn't questioning my idea. It was helping to assure my idea would come to fruition.
Yeah, it was trying to arrive at a shared image of what a successful, whatever it is, what success was going to look like. Yeah, totally.
Often, I think as a superintendent, or even in my position as chief growth officer, I have an understanding, but it sometimes is a bit detached from the real world of what it takes to actually roll that out, or what it takes to actually, create that change. I have this vision in my head. And so it was wonderful when Matt kind of was able to help put my feet back on the ground and say, this person is assuring that dream comes true.
Boy, that's really changing it for you. Yeah. What frustrated you through this situation?
I wanted to get rid of her. Right. I was like, this is slowing me down. I thought this was going to bring clarity. I thought this was going to bring, and I was like, I don't know what to do. It is derailing things. It is a meeting that should take 30 minutes is now taking an hour and a half. We're in too many rabbit holes. Like, we can't move forward because we're too worried about what's going on in the past. And so I was just frustrated because my perspective.
Well, and you had not just perspective. I'm sorry to interrupt. It also seems like you have a perspective. You're going to finish that sentence. You also had this pressure. You've been put in this new role. And so that pressure can be a motivator. It can sometimes put blinders on the opportunities that you have from your team.
$16 million is a lot, Peter, to sleep at night and think, how am I going to help a team perform when I don't get to go out and do it?
And the voices in your head, for which we all have, begin to say to you, well, you're not the right person for this. Or how do they even think to hire you? Or, right? I mean, it's like that.
Peter, this is my conversation with Matt. Over and over, I said, I need to go back to the teaching. I'm a teacher. I'm not an executive. Why did I think that I could do this executive role? I'm just a good teacher.
Imposter syndrome is a real thing for all of us. And we don't admit it. And then we sometimes fall short on decisions because we succumb to it. Wow. In the end, though, what was something that was good that came out of this?
Well, in the end, thankfully, the 4 questions felt like equal ground. I felt heard and valued, and I felt like I was hearing and valuing her. And so what, of course, has happened is she's blossomed. She's selling the lights out of things in an authentic, amazing way that helps superintendents feel seen and heard and valued. And we're rolling things out in a way that is productive and that is doable for all of the pieces that I just didn't understand, that the things that she had to do every single day. And so it didn't end in any kind of firing or getting rid of someone or surrounding myself with all of just mini me's. It really helped me learn to appreciate and recognize that it's vital that your team has different personalities and different approaches to problems.
Perfect. Jill, where might be a good place to find you or to learn more about conscious discipline?
Yes. So you can certainly find us at consciousdiscipline.com. You can personally find me at jill.molli at consciousdiscipline.com. You certainly can also go to Conscious Discipline or email us at transformation@consciousdiscipline.com. If you're just interested in, I'd just like to talk to you, Jill, or I'd like to talk with one of your representatives. Like, how could you help us?
Perfect. Our guest today was Jill Molli, a former teacher, counselor, and behavior specialist, and now the Chief Growth Officer for Conscious Discipline. And Jill, I have been really looking forward to this conversation. You and I met or were reconnected earlier this year in Kansas City, and I was so thrilled that happened. And so thank you so much for giving us time. I'm so thrilled to know that there's going to be a leadership training component coming forward. I do think that our systems are really craving the heart, the empathy that comes with conscious discipline. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. It's been lovely to be with you. And during these uncertain times, this is exactly the solution that we need, is figuring out how do we regulate ourselves so that we can transfer that to the teachers and the children that we work with.
So we're back, Peter. I loved it, right? Thought it was so great. I think I say that about pretty much every guest I think.
You do. And yet, I would say also you are genuine in your enthusiasm. Like it is, I'm glad it says to me, we continue to meet great people that we'd love to continue to connect with and learn from and learn with and those types.
I want to talk to her because her approach, their entire approach in conscious discipline is our approach at APC Leadership.
I was going to ask you that.
We're identical. Hers leans into the work around climate and discipline for students, changing the concept of discipline, which we talked about before. And the approach to adults is so similar. We lean into what people care about. I can help you to identify your why. I can help you identify not only why, the clarity of your intention and where your actions don't match. I can do that really well. I'm great at it. And I love that about Jill. Like, I just felt like, oh, you see me, you and I run this together. And she still identifies as a teacher. I'm like, that's me.
Yeah.
I still identify as a teacher.
Yeah, totally agree.
Professional descriptor I give myself.
What I want to ask you about is, so there's the decentralized school district where an individual school contacts you and says, I'd like to work on this. And then there's the centralized school district that says, oh, we want this for everybody in the school district. And so similarly with conscious discipline, I was a principal of a school that said, I can appreciate the centralized decision around PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Support. However, I really want to be part of a system, and I know you heard this in the conversation, that emphasizes empathy. And I really feel that conscious discipline does that. And so I was curious about her perspective around start with the willing, because you want to avoid initiative fatigue. So you want to start with the willing. And they caution superintendents that, start with the willing instead of creating a district initiative. And I get that. And so how is that similar to the work that you do, and what advice do you give? Because as a superintendent, I'm still like, yeah, but I know like we're going to have some resistors. And at the same time, I also know this is so important. And I know that's the wrong approach, or maybe it is. I don't know. What do you think?
She used a word at the end, or she used a story at the end about needing a me, right? She said, I needed a me for me. I needed it. And the words I would have put in her mouth in terms of what we do at our organization is a coach. She needed a coach to help her see how she could better work with the client, with her colleagues. This is exactly what we do with districts, in that, nope, you can't mandate coaching. It has to be an offer. Because if it comes as a mandate, you've instantly turned it into an evaluative tool. You turn that coach into a police officer.
Yeah,
who now has to
so
monitor
coaching,
whether you do these things.
Yeah. No, you're basically saying coaching becomes much of like a reform movement, coaching for compliance. Yes. They're making sure that there's compliance. Whereas coaching, whether it's peer coaching, which I think is the most genuine way of seeing improvement in practice, when you and your peers are learning together and coaching each other. And that can maybe the impetus or the catalyst for that can be someone in Jill's position, someone in your position, being able to support and get the language and the protocols and the support, and then sort of gradually releasing it to those to do that work together as a community.
Exactly. And we've had the exact same experience that Jill did with conscious discipline, in that when we offer coaching, we say, just whoever chooses it, don't make anyone choose it. And some of the more challenged, let's say we offer in a district coaching to principals and the superintendent or assistant superintendent says, there's a couple of new principals that we think would really benefit from coaching. We're like, sure, great. If they choose it, wonderful. And then they don't. And the superintendent said, well, they need to be getting coaching. And I'm like, well, they're not going to get it from us because they didn't choose us. And that just basically means that they're not ready. They're nervous.
So do you say, well, they haven't chosen it or they haven't chosen it yet? We can't wait to work.
It's a yet. It's a yet. Because the same thing happens. 4 principals out of 10 choose it. They come back and say, oh, this is super helpful. You should see my staff meetings. They're 1,000 times better. And other principals are like, well, can I choose it? And just like that, it's like, yeah, for sure. And so we go into coach now where suddenly we're coaching all of the principals. And does it work with everyone? No, because some principals actually are.
Well, that's another difference between reform and transformation, right? Reform would say one size fits all. Transformation says giving people what they need, engaging in inquiry, asking what if. Yeah. So I want to bring it back to Jill because what you just said makes a lot of sense. And one of the quotes that she says, we often have a very quick impulse to just try to fix it as opposed to finding out where this person's beliefs, principles, values, where they're coming from. And I think that is the difference between like the superintendent who says to you, well, did they choose it? And you're like, no, not yet. And that's okay because we're going to avoid the impulse to make a very quick fix as opposed to finding out how can we support.
So let me flip it and say, as a superintendent, what would cause you to do a quick fix when it is tied to reform? I understand quick fixes that are technical solutions, but I'm talking about a district reform. You're trying to shift a culture. What would cause you to do a quick choice?
Oh, well, you should never do a quick fix. I mean, never. And yet I have fallen victim of constantly trying to do a quick fix because you have all these pressures from specific community groups, pressures from your board of education, pressures from your teachers union, pressures from students saying they want things.
Yeah.
And truly the most important decisions or decisions that have been able to sustain over time have been those that were done carefully, thoughtfully, over time with good study. Not to say obsessively studying something that then where you never say go, right? Those can be really difficult. And so, I think about things like start times. I think about things like our restorative practice work. And at the same time, I could also see where we made a quick decision. We wanted to have a universal approach to understanding what is considered a real threat and what is a kid saying something stupid that their intent was not violence against their peers. And so we did some studies, so that took some time. We brought in the University of Virginia, who had an institute around identifying intent and doing, being able to evaluate and then engaging in whole-scale training. We did that pretty quickly because, you got a 7-year-old who has gone to a Marvel movie and then draws a picture of everybody being stabbed and the school misinterprets and thinks that the kid's got a kill list when the kid was simply just engaged in fantasy, just like any one of us might have been when we were playing cops to robbers and stuff like that. So I'd say that was a quick one, but that maybe falls under technical, although I think it bleeds into culture and school climate. When I say culture, I mean school climate, that we were going to resist the urge to suspend kids long-term for actions that may not have been, their intent wasn't to do violence.
I don't know if you meant to do it this way, but the connection to Nicholas Bradford here is just so profound.
Partners, right? It's nice to have them 2 weeks. No, I didn't do it intentionally. Although I'm thrilled that we get to, as school districts are winding down their year and thinking about next year and doing their summer planning, that they might spend some time with Nicholas Bradford from last week and then this week. They really are profound examples of ways to begin shifting, transforming, as opposed to reforming your school district.
And so human-centered, perfectly human-centered approaches to it. And if I'm leading a district, both of these people are very helpful to me.
Yeah. And those who are listening are leaders in their district. There are leaders at every level, and there are those who have an impact and influence over their school culture. And I do think it's the administrator that sets that culture. And so as they start thinking about the kind of climate that they want, they'll spend some time maybe this summer, maybe rethinking, and then without the impulse of immediately like saying, okay, we're going to do things differently, is to begin, let's spend this year studying. Let's do some study and let's try some things out and then see what that might look like. And I wish, just like Jill said, she wishes she had a Jill for herself. I wish I had like this podcast to have helped me slow down, because we feel such a sense of urgency to make a better world. And it doesn't move that quickly.
That resonated so much. I'm like, it's so clear I need a coach. It's so clear my own anxieties about my work and getting everything done is causing me to make, I wouldn't say erratic, but quick decisions that aren't necessarily the best for everyone.
Yeah.
I did
checklist mentality, right? Just say, look.
Well, that goes to this last question. Maybe this will be my last question for you.
Go for it.
I had trouble visualizing her graphic of the bullseye. Like, so going from checklist to bullseye. And I get it. I should say, I don't know if I get it. I want to get where she's going. But I had trouble understanding, like, how does it shift? Why, in what ways does it shift from a checklist to a bullseye? How did you understand that?
Let's listen to it.
The big differentiator between conscious discipline and other programs is we're not a set of curriculum. We're not a set of books. And so here's what I want you to envision in your head. Most folks have a checklist. So a lot of superintendents are very left-brained. A lot of principals are very left-brained. They like their linear, logical, linguistic. They like all of the things to be data. And so they check things off of a list. For us to shift a culture, we see it as a circle. So shift from your checklist in your brain and move to a bullseye. Okay, so I want you to see a bullseye in front of you.
So for them to shift their culture, they want to see it as a circle. So shift that checklist and make it a bullseye.
Meaning the thing that you want to accomplish is in the center.
Exactly.
It's interesting.
The superintendent always has a vision. That's his job. The principal always has a vision, and the teacher always has a vision. When you look at that vision of the superintendent, the next layer slides into it, and sometimes compliance, obedience, but underlying is control, which is so interesting. I've been having that conversation with another superintendent that I've been working with around how he bristles at the term a factory model, because he says, I've worked in a factory and schools are not like factories, and we cannot keep saying that schools haven't changed and shifted. And what Jill's saying is, but that's the control element. And that's, what I think we mean by the factory model, that there's a foreperson who's in charge and tells people what to do. All those external ways of obedience and compliance. So sorry.
They still exist. Exactly. They still exist. Her metaphor, or connecting that metaphor to the genes day or the external motivators, I thought was really interesting as well. I'm like, those obviously don't work because they're intrinsic, right? I'm giving you a completely extrinsic motivation, so that it's not going to build discipline toward a different culture. It's slow because discipline is slow. And by discipline, I mean practice, not punishment. I mean practice. It made me think of when people say they want to have a better climate across this diverse group population of students. And then they do a international day. And I'm like, and I don't want to diminish International Day because I like food too, right? I like food. I like music. Like if that mama is going to make pupusas, like I'm all in, man. That sounds awesome. And that will build a collective climate. Doing International Day doesn't do that. You actually have to do to have a better climate across multiple differences, identity differences, you've got to work on climate across multiple identity differences. You've got to actually acknowledge that there are differences and that we don't all see the same thing. To her point about how those two styles of working, her visionary versus the action-oriented person, you got to work on it. You got to come to some agreement about how to do it.
I love it. You're making me think of all the schools that do their International Day. And they're like, I love your food. It's so great that you're here. Oh, and you brought your flag and look at your traditional dress. Man, aren't we an amazing school district? And you're like, we are? It's great that there are this many languages and the families come from all over the world. And this is just the surface. We've got to really learn from each other and without judgment, because there are going to be different beliefs, values, and principles that come from where we come from and how we were socialized. And so, no, I think that's a really fair point. Well, I'm so glad that we had a chance to visit with Jill. I'm so glad that she was willing to spend some time. And I think you're right. I love the fact that these go side by side 2 weeks in a row with complementary and still different approaches to building really just, thoughtful, compassionate school districts, school buildings, communities that really value and honor the people who are there. So this is great.
This is my plea to Jill. Like, I would love to talk to you. I think we would have a lot of fun.
I know Jill's going to come find you. All right, Jamie. Hey, listen, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Wait.
Oh, the 5. We forgot about 5 stars.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it can be part of your checklist if you want, or just make it a bullseye like that one, like, boom, 5 stars, bullseye. And then you can write whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Whatever you want. Say, I too want to meet Jill. The 5 stars does help us in the algorithm.
So get to it, people. Get to it. Hey, all right. Now I'll see you next week. Bye.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.